AT&T has posted their second quarter results today. What does that mean for Warner Media and HBO Max? Are the streaming wars going well for them, and what do the numbers look like? Also, did Warner Media make the right decision to put all of their intellectual properties in both theaters and HBO Max day and date this year in 2021? Let's take a look. Renegade Online. Now, as I've stated many times, this really isn't kind of a financial channel, right? This is an entertainment news, pop culture news. This is just a fun channel for stuff like that. But when the financials and the business stuff kind of crosses over in the entertainment industry, which is what we like to look at from an analytical standpoint, we get into it. So this is kind of one of those things. And I'm not going to dive into the numbers. This isn't about the stock prices or the stock itself or whatever. This is just about, how are these companies doing with delivering content to consumers and what we can expect going forward and what these numbers might tell us now about where they are going to go. Yesterday and today, we found out numbers from Netflix, which reported within the last 24 to 48 hours on their second quarter earnings. And some people were a little shocked to see that domestic subscribers had gone down about 500,000. That being said, it's a relatively marginal amount. To me, Netflix is rather saturated in the market. Any potential for future growth, at least on the scale they've enjoyed up to this point, is probably very limited. Meanwhile, companies like Discovery and Warner Media, which, not coincidentally enough, will be merging next year if they get approval, are both in that more rapid growth phase, hovering around 40 to 50 million subscribers apiece and going and going and going. We're going to get to that in just a minute. So Netflix kind of shows us what you get to when you get to that behemoth state. It's a content juggernaut. The problem with Netflix the last year, obviously, has been lockdowns, right? Everybody's staying home. Everybody's signing up. Growth accelerated on Netflix tremendously because of the stay-at-home stuff. So instead of them having a steady growth over last year and into 21, a lot of it got front-loaded last year. So we're seeing some of that kind of pull back. Nothing quite out of the ordinary, nothing that's terribly surprising. The other side of that equation, of course, is that Netflix, all during last year, like every other Hollywood studio, really couldn't get out there and produce a lot of new content. So a lot of those shows that people stick around for Netflix on just are not coming in the same time frames that people would normally expect them. So there's a little bit of subscriber drop-off. But remember, Netflix is a juggernaut with over 200 million subs. A retreat of 500,000 in one quarter by itself is really nothing to worry about to me. Netflix, I think, will just keep going and going and going. But again, that's just my personal opinion. I don't see that doing much to change. But as far as AT&T and HBO Max and Disney Plus and Discovery, all these guys, Paramount Plus, which is coming up, all these things on the smaller side, this is what we want to talk about today. But I want to take a walk down memory lane first because I think this is very important, especially in the case of AT&T and HBO Max as we look at how they did this quarter with subscribers on HBO Max. We're going to start with this one. This was back in December of last year. And of course, we all just saw the new Dune trailer drop today. It was, in my opinion, it was fantastic. I love it. I'm looking forward to Dune. I'm a huge Dune fan. I've been a Dune fan since I was a kid. It has been a long, long time since I've read the Frank Herbert books. But I'm really looking forward to the movie, and the trailer has me absolutely blown away. But in the context of this video, talking about how AT&T and Warner did with HBO Max subscribers and what it means for them going forward as an entertainment company, Dune is one of the big key pieces, as was Godzilla vs. Kong. These were two of their biggest intellectual properties that they were going to throw out this year, were obviously originally intended for theatrical-only release. But then we got this article back in December of last year when Warner Media, Jason Kilar at the time, announced that their entire 2021 slate would be going day and date release on HBO Max with the theaters. And of course, theater exhibitors cried foul, and rightfully so. But two movies in particular in that lineup, as I just mentioned, Godzilla vs. Kong and Dune, posed a special problem of sorts to HBO Max. Now, one thing you need to understand about Dune and Godzilla vs. Kong is that unlike the other titles largely slated on Warner Media and HBO Max this year, Those two movies were not completely done in and of themselves by Warner. Warner is really a distribution company. Both of these movies were created and produced by Legendary. And earlier this year, of course, there was some flack, and this is the kind of thing that got it started, talking about that Legendary was not very happy late last year with Warner's decision, because most of these kind of Hollywood studio production companies, their contracts, their profit sharing is tied to theatrical revenues. Well, if you weren't going to put the movies in the theaters, then that means their profit margins were going to go up in smoke. And if it was going to be day and date release on HBO Max and in the theaters in tandem, it was still going to put a tremendous amount of loss, because people aren't going to go, I'll go watch it in the theater. A lot of people are going to stay home and watch it on HBO Max. Legendary is not getting a cut of that pie. So there was a big fight. Now, of course, in the end of the day, after much discussion, Warner Media kind of won the day, although it did cost them a pretty penny. It was said that, if we go here to this Observer, this is back in January 11th, Warner Media to pay a boatload of money in the wake of its HBO Max move. And again, this is specifically relating to Legendary. If we go down here, we'll find out right here, directly after the announcement in December, we questioned how this would impact talent compensation. It should come as no surprise that this was the sticking point for the rest of the industry as well. Now, after drawn-out negotiations, Warner Media will pay a bundle of money to profit participants in order to get this HBO Max strategy off the ground. On Friday, THR reported that Warner Brothers was nearing a 9-figure deal, likely in excess of $225 million, with Legendary over the hybrid release of Godzilla vs. Kong, while Denis Villeneuve's Dune may revert back to an exclusive theatrical release. Now, here's the problem. And I apologize, I was reading that fast, and I know I butchered Denny's last name. I'm so sorry. Here's the thing. That was just for Godzilla vs. Kong. $225 minimum, which is probably about right. I'm betting that Legendary might have squeezed as much as $300 out of them for that. Dune is going to be something similar, although we have not, to my knowledge, we have not seen any news on the figures of this happening. However, it's happening. It is happening. It has been here. This is directly on the HBO Max website. I have an account with HBO Max. I've acquired HBO through my cable provider Spectrum, and part of that package is HBO, and so I get HBO Max. So I'm on HBO Max's website. This is the title line and the last part of the trailer that came out today for Dune. So there you go. See it in theaters and on HBO Max on October 22nd. So what does that tell us? Well, it tells us at this point that we can make a pretty good assumption that another deal has been reached between Warner Media and Legendary Pictures. And I'm willing to bet that the price for this is going to be even bigger than it was for Godzilla vs. Kong. So if Godzilla vs. Kong was $225 to $250, this is probably at least that, if not more, because that's the only way they're going to get out of that. Because otherwise, it's basically a breach of contract. I would assume. I'm not a lawyer, but I would assume that would be a pretty easy guess that that's a breach. So they're getting paid to walk away with this and be able to put it on HBO Max. Why are they doing this? And this is what brings us to the kind of the point of this discussion, what launched us, AT&T's financial reports that came out today, talking about, of course, one of the things across all of their platforms. They had some good growth in post-pay cell phone base, meaning as opposed to prepaid phones, just the regular phones like most of us have out there, where we sign up and we pay a regular monthly bill. They had some growth on that. AT&T obviously wants to have a lot of cash on hand to start building out their 5G network. Warner Media is looking to get spun off and merged with Discovery, headed up by David Zaslav. We had a great video on that just a few weeks ago, talked about it. And it all boils down to average revenue per user, or ARPUs, when it comes to the streaming stuff. So let's look at that. I'm not going to run through this. This is not about doing a financial analysis of the entire quarter for AT&T. That's not what we talk about here. This is really about the streaming portion of this, and to understand what kind of impact that has, I think, on their growth and where we are in the streaming wars with them and Netflix and Disney Plus. So this is key to understand. And again, there's a lot of stuff in here. Not going through all this. Absolutely not. The key part I wanted to bring up was here. Warner Media operational highlights. Okay, revenues for the second quarter were $8.8 billion, up 30.7% versus the year-ago quarter. So year over year, that's a hell of a climb. But again, not surprised, because at this point last year, theaters were shut down. All of that revenue from theatrical releases, big summer blockbusters, things like that, were shelved. So no surprise we've gotten that back. But subscription revenues were $4 billion, up 21%. Primarily reflecting the 38.5% growth of direct-to-consumer HBO Max and HBO subscription revenues following the launch of HBO Max 1 year ago. Advertising revenues, blah, blah, blah. Again, not important. When I want to go down here to where I've got this highlighted, at the end of the quarter, there were 47 million domestic HBO Max and HBO subs, up from 44.2 at the end of the first quarter. Domestic HBO Max and HBO subs increased 10.7 million year over year, driven by HBO Max retail sub growth. Domestic sub ARPU was $11.90. Big time ARPU for HBO Max. And this is key. We're going to talk about how this fits in to this day-and-date release strategy. Okay, so let's roll back 1 quarter ago. The end of the first quarter of this year, 2021, this was information that was on AT&T's financial reports for that quarter. So let's kind of we need this information to put things in perspective. Key points right here at the top. HBO Max and HBO added 2.7 million domestic subs during the first quarter. Well, we just saw on the last slide, they added about another 3 billion. They added a bunch more. So what happened right at the end of the first quarter? Godzilla vs. Kong came out. That was the first mega big release that they had on HBO Max, day and date with theaters. Then, of course, the rest of the second quarter that ended June 30th, we got Mortal Kombat, which is another big one. We got The Conjuring. We got all kind of stuff. So we see that the content they're putting on there is driving new subs, right? If HBO was sitting there stagnant, not having anything new land on it, the argument could easily be made that subscriber growth probably would also just be sitting relatively steady. Now, when we look at this and we say, well, 2.7 million subs doesn't sound like a whole lot. Well, this, they've only started the year with about 40 million subs to begin with, U.S. domestic. And so when you look at this, they're on pace this year. If they do about 2.5 million subs per quarter, they're on pace to add about 10 million subs for the year. And in fact, in the second quarter, they increased their guidance to where total subs might be between 70 and 77 million, I believe, if I remember correctly. And that's global subs by the end of the year. They're thinking they should be around 120 to 125 million total subs by 2025. They have a much more conservative, projection than, say, Disney Plus. Disney Plus, of course, still has this gargantuan 250 million subscriber goal for 2024, 2025. So Warner's being a lot more reserved, I guess. But why? Why is that? Why, what's important about that number? Well, again, let's go back to the ARPUs on this. If the ARPUs for HBO Max is $11.90 per subscriber, that's a boatload of money. Comparably, Disney Plus is getting around $4 to $5 ARPU. So with maybe about half the subscribers of Disney Plus right now, domestically speaking, supposedly Disney Plus has somewhere around 80 to 85 million domestic. Warner Media HBO Max has, at this point, 47 million. And they're making they're making at least twice as much, if not almost 3 times as much revenue per user as Disney Plus. Meaning that HBO Max, with its subscriber base, is making more money than Disney on their subscription services, bar none. So this is a big deal. So, when you look at this and we see, okay, Disney's putting out their Premier Access movies on Disney Plus, Cruella, we just had Black Widow, things like this. You got to pay an extra $30 to get it. And we talked about this in the last video, which I would encourage you all to go watch. A lot of good information in there about how Disney Plus is cannibalizing all the downstream repurchases of the same intellectual property by putting it right up front, day and date with the theater, for a purchase price to have forever. See, HBO Max puts these out day and date with the theater, but they're only on HBO Max for 30 days. Then they disappear. So you're going to have to go back in at some point and get them. Like, I just bought Mortal Kombat on 4K. I bought Godzilla vs. Kong on 4K. You think I'm going to buy any of this Disney Plus stuff that, frankly, a lot of it I don't care about when it comes out on a 4K disc? No, because it's always going to be on Disney Plus. It ain't going anywhere. So there's no point in it. And there's no point in spending $30 on Premier Access when it's going to be there 90 days later for free if you just wait. HBO Max, I think, they have a better, smarter model for this. So here's the bottom line. At $11.90 average revenue per user for these guys. Here's the thing. That's if they add 10 million subs this year with this strategy. That's $119 million of revenue per month. Per month, which is almost $1.6 billion of net revenue, average revenue per user, over the course of 12 months. Most subscribers, once they sub to one of these kind of services, are relatively sticky. Sure, you're going to have some drop-off where they sign up for a couple of months and then dump it and then go to a different service. That's really not the rule. That's the rare exception to the rule if you look at the whole, right? Otherwise, we would see subscription numbers for these services fluctuating wildly, quarter to quarter, based on what show was on there. Most of the time, once people commit to something like this, they're in it. And HBO knows this. Disney knows this. Netflix knows this. Netflix's ARPU is almost $14 or a little over $14 per user. So, I mean, Netflix is the champion at this, okay? And that's why they're so much bigger. Disney's probably the furthest one back when you really look at it in terms of revenue. HBO is actually beating Disney. They're beating their pants off at this point, just in terms of dollars, real dollars. So, you're talking about $1.6 billion a year. If you put that in terms of theatrical revenue, that theatrical revenue would be somewhere around at least $3 billion, $3.5 billion. So would they have had between Dune, between Godzilla vs. Kong, and some of these other smaller films, would they have guaranteed, not knowing going into 21, would they have had $3.5 to $4 billion of revenue from those handful of movies? Perhaps, but perhaps not. But here's the thing, they still got some theatrical revenue because they still release them in the theaters, okay? And they're only doing this, so far as they say, through the end of 2021. So we're going to see what happens. But from the looks of it right now, I think the strategy is working. Because had they just gone into theaters, you could argue that this kind of growth that they've had in HBO Max with the average revenue per user they have, which is stunning, is working out. And that includes the $9.99 a month ad-based subscription that they launched a few months ago. And if you look at Discovery Plus, they make more money, frankly, with the ad-based than they do the more expensive non-ad-based. Discovery Plus's $5 a month subscription, they're making $11 a month average revenue per user on that $5 a month subscription because of the ads. HBO is obviously trying to go in that direction, and I'm sure that David Zaslav has a lot to do with that going forward. So good on these guys. But anyway, leave some thoughts and comments below. Appreciate you being here. I know this was a bit of a long one, but there's a lot of good information here, a lot of interesting information. So pass it around, share it out, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. We love to talk about things like this here on Valiant and Renegade. And until next time, thank you so much. Take care.